The first independent, unbiased and completely free source of information and entertainment on the internet and soon on the outernet, also around the globe, throughout the solar system, all across the galaxy, to the far edges of the universe. Ladies and gentlemen, in-betweeners and outsiders, welcome to another episode of RawCast. This must be episode number 12, if we are not mistaken. And we think that we are not mistaken. But anyways, if we are mistaken, we can ameliorate this mistake very easily. We're just gonna announce the correct number next time. We're just not gonna announce any numbers from hence thereof commencing now. How have you been? What are you doing? How's everything? How's life? This is the middle of the week. This is a Thursday, not a Wednesday, but yeah, well, there you go. I mean, we operate under the regime of a 7-day week. So you can actually split the week in half. It's either going to be like, what's the middle of the week? Is it Wednesday afternoon, Thursday morning, Thursday, what is it? I mean, if you start counting from a Sunday, there you go. So you've got a Sunday, then you've got a Monday and a Tuesday. So that's 1 day of operation and 2 days of non-operation, and then it's a Wednesday. So you operate, and then you've got like a Thursday and a Friday and a Saturday. So that's 1 day of operation and 3 days of non-operation. And then you've got the Sunday again, so it's all pretty confusing. So you can't really split the week in half unless you just sit there with a chronometer and say, well, this is Wednesday morning at about 3 o'clock in the morning. So this is like, I don't know, we're just splitting the week exactly in half. But well, whatever. This is a Thursday morning. It could have been a Wednesday evening or a Wednesday morning or a Tuesday or whatever. We just said that we're going to be broadcasting our show once in the middle of the week in English, and once on Sundays, because everybody's awake on Sundays, in Greek, because we've got the good or a bad fortune to reside in a predominantly Greek-speaking country, also a predominantly English-speaking country, so that's why we're doing the show in two different languages. And again, if we knew any more languages, we would probably use them too, because what's the use of knowing more languages than one and not using them? There's no use. So if you know more languages than one, you can quite clearly understand, well, if you can, it's not always clear, but if you know more than one language and you use them frequently and you actually enjoy using those languages frequently, you can understand more easily that, you can understand the nuances of each language and the particular uses and how the phonetics all joined together, and the different idioms and ways of saying and ways of seeing, which are different but not explicitly different. I mean, there's no dramatic changes between languages. Okay, some people are going to come and say, well, think about the Asian pictograms. It's not the same. I mean, you've got a symbol there that kind of, it's like a picture. A picture is worth 1,000 words. You've got a symbol there that kind of gives you a whole scene instead of having a few different phonetic sounds that when you jumble them together you come out with proper sentences that kind of describe something. So you've got a picture there that kind of describes a scene. So it's quite different, isn't it? Well, it could be different, but then again, it's different tool for operating on the same material. So you can, for example, it's like somebody taking a piece of clay and then kind of playing it with their hands and then making something out of that piece of clay just with their bare hands. And then it's the same person with the same piece of clay on a potter's wheel along with some other pottery instruments, and then they're using those instruments of making a different object, an object that appears differently, or maybe that behaves differently, using the same piece of clay. But it's the same piece of clay, and it's the same, let's just say, end object. It just looks different, it just feels different, but then again, it's a piece of clay transformed into a tangible object. So there you go. The job is done. What you wanted to do was to transform that piece of clay into an understandable, a usable object. So either you use your hands or you use different kinds of tools. There's no better or worse here. This is the analogy we're trying to point out. There's no better or worse. It's just a different object from the same base material. So again, you've got different languages observing the same actual world, or the same world. We're not going to use the word actual. They're observing the same world, if you can say. Let's call it the objective world, although we can't really say it's objective because we've got different tools of examining that world. So all those tools are subjective, and even if you are truly and clearly observing an objective object, an object, not two or three, an object, you're using different tools to interpret that object. So what you come out as the end result of your observation is still a subjective observation, and it's based on the tools you are using. So if we say that we are observing the same world, it's just conjecture. We are assuming that we are observing the same world. Could be different. It relates. It comes close, but it's not exactly the same. So we are assuming, because we can't really know, we're not exactly using in the same analogy as the piece of clay being made by the hands and the piece of clay being made by tools. The base material is the same, a piece of clay, the world. But you can either use your hands or a language, or you can use the potter's tools, another set of language, and you can create a different object. So a different observer creates a different end object from the same observation, whilst another observer creates another object from the same observation. What's the relation between those objects, between those two objects? There could be some observations, some similarities, there could be some differences, but the base fact is that we assume that they come from the same base material reality. So what we're trying to point out right now, we're not trying to point out anything, we're just sitting here discussing. We could be wrong. Obviously, there's the comments below. You can comment whatever you want, you can say whatever you want. Even not saying anything, we're assuming that you said what you wanted to say, which was nothing. So yes, the base reality. We can assume that the base reality is one, and each and every one of us is observing that base reality through their own instruments. And what we call our own personal instruments is obviously, first of all, our biological makeup, because right now we are humans. We could be cats, and cats know everything, you see? Cats know everything, obviously, but that's another part of another story. So biologically, we've got our biological makeup. Right now we are human. We could be cats, we could be dogs, we could be birds, we could be stones. So we've got that psychological makeup as well. And we've got the environment into which these biological and psychological makeups are being constantly updated and rearranged and formed, in a sense. So you've got this thing that's distinct, in some sense, from other things, and it's quite similar in another sense to every other things. And they've got a distinct psychological makeup and distinct biological makeup, and these makeups. And obviously, if we are dividing, let's just say the human experience or a experience into the biological and the psychological, is because we only approach the subject from these two schools of thought, of examining, of inquiry. So you've got the biological makeup and you've got the psychological makeup, and they constitute this thing which is called human, and this thing which is called the human is operating throughout this, finds itself into this environment, and through this environment, through the friction that this thing called human, this entity, this being, this entity, let's call it, this entity called human, through the friction that they have with their environment and with themselves, they kind of keep assimilating and destroying stuff and facts about themselves, and they kind of regenerate what it is, their overall makeup. So you see, you've got an entity that's ever changing, and it's in some sense completely dissimilar to any other entity. And you've got this entity observing and operating again, we're assuming a base world, a base material, a base reality. But what's the end result of this observation? Obviously, it depends on the psychological, on the biological, on the environmental makeup, on everything that constitutes this entity. What is this entity? This entity is not to be found, let's just say, dangling alone in space amongst absolute nothingness. This entity is found in an environment, and the environment itself finds itself upholding and creating and kind of being, let's just say, the form, the mold into which these entities are being born and operate and observing. So the observer alters the observation. So the observer alters what is being observed. Even if we can say that there is a base reality being observed, we cannot actually, all of us, unanimously agree to what that base reality which is being observed is. We can only be sure, and we can only be sure of the things that we experience ourselves, and even from the things, for the things that we experience ourselves, we cannot be 100% sure of. What we are seeing, what we are experiencing, what we are living through is an interpretation of what is. So somebody's going to say, so what is really there? The answer is, we can't really know, because we are not cats. And only cats know everything. But there you go, maybe at some point we're going to become cats, or we're going to acquire that whole body of knowledge that will allow us to understand what is the objective based reality, what exactly is that we are seeing and interpreting. What's the bedrock, if there is, of what we call the ground of being? We've read somewhere the other day that somebody, in lieu of using this tired and old and quite frankly alienating word God, they use the phrase the ultimate God of being. The ultimate source of being, or the ultimate ground of being. Because the person responsible, obviously, if you say the word God, when we use it, we kind of translate it into something that's there, it's unchangeable, and it's like it's as solid as can be. I mean, it's the one thing that you can definitely depend on, that is going to be there and never disappear from your face, and you can always be sure. But because it has all these negative religious connotations, this person decided to call it I can't remember. We can't remember who this person was. We're just noting it because it's interesting. The ultimate ground of being. And we're using that source, that phrase, just to point out that there is an ultimate ground of being, something unalterable, unchangeable, solid, steady, eternal there. We just don't have the direct access to it. We're just standing on the side. Well, actually, we're not on the side. We're in it. We're part of it. We are it. So we're standing wherever we're standing, and we're observing basically ourselves, our whole being. And because there is this divide between the thing that's being observed and the observer, and this divide is being generated obviously by our sensory organs, our perceptual organs. If we were cats, we wouldn't be living through this divide. We would know that everything is one, because cats know everything. So yeah, did we reach a conclusion? No, we didn't, but there is no worry. We can reach a conclusion or we cannot reach a conclusion. The whole point is, I don't know, we are here and we're having fun. Yeah?